Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Gundamonium consumes way too much war content and ends up having an existential crisis. Well, the good thing about that is I can turn a crisis into a diorama, even if it is an existential one. So let's get into that. Here is the final product of what I ended up making. Recently, I've been really into turning points in battles and wars, and I feel like the coolest or the most interesting aspect of a turning point is when something like the reserves are thrown in at the last minute and they take up positions and then they turn the tide. And in the grim darkness of the 41st millennium, the Imperial Guard really exemplify that more than I think any other army in the setting. So that is who I went with this time. I used my hot wire cutter and some styrofoam to cut out the general shape that I wanted for the dugout. I used an X-Acto knife to cut out some random hole patterns for explosions, because I do want this diorama to feel like the Guardsmen are defending a position that maybe they just retook, and over the years or months or days has been taken by the enemy and then retaken by the Guard. So as a result, there's going to be just a bunch of stuff everywhere, just garbage. That might even be hundreds of years old. Who knows? When we're talking about the 41st millennium, there are planets that have been under siege for hundreds and hundreds of years, which always makes for some great ideas in this case. After the base had been solidly glued down, it was time to grab some Vallejo earth texture and just give everything an earth texture. After a few base coats of the earth texture is down, I then went ahead and made some, what are these? Bricks. Yes, I made some bricks with my hot wire cutter. Hot wire cutters are really fun to use, so I will basically use any excuse to make any sort of shape. And this time it was bricks, as we can see from this handy little shot. And of course, you got to add some texture to the bricks, so you grab your empty espresso container, tin, and you just shake it up. Here's also an example of what not to do when you want to make the base structure for a rubble pile. The one that I made is embarrassingly flat and it just did not look good. Here's a recording of me just taking out some aggression on a piece of styrofoam to just weather it up and make it look cool and beaten up and shot up. And also gluing in some little pieces of armature wire to act as rebar for later. Because, I don't know, it just looks so much cooler when, a destroyed wall has rebar sticking out. It just makes you think, like, whoa, what happened to that wall? I don't want to be around that wall. I don't know what I'm saying. After I'd made that really cool wall with a really cool rebar, I finally came to the conclusion that the initial rubble I made was not good. So I got some more, tin foil, and made a much, I think, superior looking one. Also, to just add kind of random elements to it, I added a bunch of different shapes and sizes of tinfoil. I also dug deep into my collection of garbage and took out some really old sprues. As we can see here, I think that's a Lizardman sprue from there it is, from 1996. That's crazy. Here are all the greeblies that I collected for the diorama. I took some corrugated paper in order to make some, I don't know what these are called, shingles, like metal steel roof tiles. But you know the ones that I mean, right? The ones that are just literally everywhere, all over the planet. And I just weathered them up by cutting them randomly with scissors and beating the crap out of them with an X-Acto knife. Now that everything on the base had dried, I watered down some PVA glue and just got to town. I also figured it would be a good idea to just glue down some random detritus to everything, because honestly, if it's rubble, it's going to be full of everything. Fallen buildings, fallen aeroplanes, fallen comets, dead people, unfortunately, because it's the grim 41st millennium. After everything had sufficiently dried, I gave it the classical tappy test. Tap, 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 tap. Nothing fell off, thankfully, which meant that everything was nicely glued. To add another layer of gritty Warzone-like feeling to the diorama, I grabbed some Gale Force 9 barbed wire and added that. And also trimmed off the excess. After the main diorama elements had been added to the base, I then just randomly started gluing down greeblies to everything. Starting with the corrugated paper, and then eventually just the plastic greeblies that I stole from everything else that I have in my bits box. And that is a perfect example of how I essentially build everything. I just fumble until it works, or until I feel like it works. Okay, oh yeah, okay, that reminds me. Prior to building this diorama, I had a really random nightmare where Russell Crowe, the actor, was a professor in my school. And for some reason, it was like my first day back in university. And I don't know why, but everything that I had, the textbooks and my supplies and everything, were still in their packaging. And over the course of this nightmare, Russell Crowe looked at me and he asked me a question about the class that he wanted me to answer. And I couldn't, I was like, oh, don't worry, sir. Yeah, I'll answer this right away. I just need to get everything out. And so I was fumbling with everything and I was trying to open all of my textbooks, which were still wrapped. And then I dropped my pencil case on the floor. And Russell Crowe leaned in really close and he went like, Gundemonium, you're a pillock, mate. And he laughed in my face. And then I woke up with just in a cold sweat. Prior to building dioramas, I'd really only ever used the Vallejo primer gray color. And I've never really been too enthused about that one because it usually ends up looking really more white than gray. At least it reads more white, I should say, and it allows the original colors of the things to bleed through. Like, for example, if I'm priming up a Zaku with the gray, I will need to add about 4 coats of primer before it looks quote-unquote gray. However, with Vallejo Black Primer, this is just 1 coat. It goes on super duper smooth and it looks great. It also doesn't tear, like it never comes off. Boop. Boop. Oh. After the official cookie seal of approval, it was time to just get on to the painting. Because this is supposed to be a destroyed urban environment, I felt like gray would be the best bet. Just various tones of gray, adding different colors to gray, and then putting gray on everything. Because honestly, when I'm walking around downtown, I feel like outside of signage, everything is gray. The ground is gray. I guess asphalt is black. But aside from asphalt and signage, everything else is gray, right? The buildings, I mean, I guess they could be bricks. Red bricks. That's not really common though in downtown because downtown all the buildings are new. Anyways, as we can see, yeah, I painted everything with various tones of gray. I completely forgot to shoot footage of myself adding the main brown to the, what are they called? The blast holes. And then because I didn't want everything to look the same and boring, I did touch everything up with some other shades like terracotta for some random bricks and random debris. Also, truthfully, painting tiny little dots and specks in a different color is just kind of really fun. You guys should do it too. Honestly, just get dirt, like pocket sand, and throw it on the ground, and then just get your paintbrush and just cover it in dirt. Don't cover it in dirt, cover it in paint is what I meant. After all the random detritus on the floor had been done, I painted all of the metal things silver, because for the most part I feel like metal is silver, so why not make it silver, including the rebar in the very cool wall. And then the wooden, what would that be, a pallet that all of their supplies are sitting on was brown. I'm actually not really sure what that box is to the very left. It has an official Imperium Aquila on it, but I'm not sure if it's a storage container or some sort of a power electricity thing, but I thought it looked really, really cool. So for the sake of this diorama, that is a storage container. It probably just has all of their payroll and supplies for the weekend. Now it's time for a really cool part, which is just rusting up all of the metal. It's really fun to do, and it's just really fun to watch the orangey, rusty droplets fall down. Currently for all of my products, I'm using the Vallejo Mecha Line Rust Wash. I like it just because it's really easy to use and it's water soluble, so you can just really easily wash your brushes afterwards. However, I do feel like it doesn't look like natural rust, which I'm not sure if they were going for that, but it's so bright. I know that rust can be really, really bright, but I always feel that it's usually much darker. At least that's personally what I feel. I don't know. I also wanted to muck up and grime all of the concrete slabs. And for this, I used literally the grime texture by Vallejo as well. I tend to use Vallejo for everything because, like I said, for the rust, Vallejo products tend to just be water soluble. And it just means that literally you can wash your brushes with water afterwards, and they tend to just work fine. Also, because they're water soluble, if a wash is much too thick, it's really, really, really easy to thin them down because all you need to use is water. You don't really need to use any other kind of thinner. Because Vallejo is a product that I've used and trusted for a very long time, when I saw that they had a resin available in my local hobby store, I decided to go with theirs. At the end of the day, even though it kind of worked in this diorama, I don't think I want to use it again in the future. I didn't really have an opportunity to show it on film, oh my god, on camera. How old am I? But it took around 3 pours for me to get the resin to look how I wanted. And this is because I'm not exactly sure, because I don't know really how this stuff works, but what ended up happening is, even though everything was sealed, there was no leakage from the resin, but when it dried, it would shrink. There was significant shrinkage. So it kept drying and then cracking. And so I would have to mix up another pour of resin. After the resin pours were done and fully cured, I ripped all of my little dudes off their stands and started gluing them into place. So here is an actual example of what everything looked like when it was finished. And you can see in the top right corner that the resin actually has a dip in it. And I don't know why it did that, because the Vallejo resin, you don't need to mix it. It's just a pour and then forget, essentially, until it dries. And yeah, it just kept doing that. That was after 3 pours. It still had that significant dip. And by that point, I was just tired of constantly having to mix more and redoing it. So I decided not to. Now that everything was finally done and glued and in place, it was time for glamour shots. I guess none of you could see that, but as I said that, I actually did jazz hands.